In October 2022, a young couple renovating an old farmhouse in rural Ohio tore open a wall and found a wooden box covered in decades of dust. Inside, handwritten journals, circuit diagrams, dates running from 1995 all the way to 2021, and a Polaroid photograph of a man standing beside a large ring-shaped metal frame with a date stamp that should have been impossible, because the man in that photograph had been officially missing since 1997. His garage had burned to the ground. No body was ever found, and the world had long since decided he was dead. His name was Mike Markham. And 3 weeks after that box was found, he knocked on the door of that farmhouse and asked if he could come inside and explain. This is not a story about time travel. Not exactly. It is a story about what happens when someone finds something they were never supposed to find, pushes further than any sane person would, and pays a price so strange and so permanent that most people who hear it cannot decide whether to feel horror or grief. And here is what makes it worse. The people who met him in 2022 are already struggling to remember his face. Mike Markham grew up in rural Missouri in the 1970s. No university education, no research grants, no laboratory. Just a kid who was dangerously, obsessively, almost pathologically fascinated with electricity. He scavenged transformers from junkyards. He taught himself electronics from library books he checked out so many times the librarians knew him by name. He spent every free hour in whatever space he could get access to, building anything capable of throwing a spark. By the time he was in his early 20s, he was operating out of a garage on a rented farmstead, running experiments that would have made most electrical engineers genuinely nervous. Sometime in the early 1990s, he built a Jacob's ladder, 2 metal rods in a V shape, high voltage, an arc of electricity climbing upward between them, standard physics demonstration equipment. The kind of thing you see in old science fiction films crackling in the background while a scientist shouts over the noise. Nothing about it should have led anywhere unusual. But one night, working alone, Mike positioned a cheap laser pointer to shine directly through the climbing arc. The hum of the transformers shifted pitch. The arc, which should have been chaotic and random by nature, suddenly tightened, steadied, became something almost deliberate looking. And then Mike noticed something no textbook he had ever read described. A steel washer sitting on the workbench nearby flickered. Not knocked by vibration, not moved by airflow. One moment, it was there. Then, for a fraction of a second, it simply was not. Then, it was back. Exactly where it had been. As if nothing had happened, except the air in the garage had gone sharp with ozone. And something else Mike could not name made every hair on his forearm stand straight up. He tried it again. Coins, screws, small pieces of metal placed between the rods, and sometimes, for just a heartbeat, they vanished. No sound, no movement. Just a brief, impossible absence where a solid object should have been. And then the object back, unchanged, in exactly the spot it had occupied before. Mike froze every time it happened. And every time he stood there staring at the workbench, he understood that his life had just divided itself into 2 distinct eras. Everything before that moment, and everything that came after. He called Coast to Coast AM in January of 1995, the late-night radio program hosted by Art Bell, a man who had spent years listening to every variety of impossible claim from every type of caller, and had developed a finely calibrated sense for the difference between someone performing and someone genuinely shaken. Mike was genuinely shaken. He stumbled over his words. He told Art he had built something in his garage that could make solid objects vanish from reality for fractions of a second and then return them undamaged. Art pressed him immediately. How do you know the object actually disappears? Could it be an optical illusion from the arc itself? Mike's answer made the studio go quiet. He said he knew because he could feel it. When the field hit right, everything in the garage felt wrong. The air felt like it was holding its breath. And he said he was not the only one who noticed. His dog refused to enter the garage anymore. Birds stopped landing on the roof. Something about the field made living things want to be somewhere else entirely. Art told him to document everything, get witnesses, record video, call back with proof. Mike promised he would. Over the next year, the experiments escalated far beyond what any reasonable person would call safe. Mike was not interested in making small objects flicker anymore. He wanted to understand the mechanism, control it, amplify it. That required power his scavenged equipment could not deliver. In the summer of 1995, he pulled 6 industrial transformers from a rural electrical substation and wired them into the garage. When he fired the system up, it drew enough current to cause a brownout across several neighboring properties. Utility investigators traced the surge directly to his door. 60 days in county jail. And here is what nobody expected. Those 60 days made him worse. He spent every waking hour sketching diagrams, refining equations, planning a larger build. He walked out more consumed than he had been when he walked in. By late 1995, working with legally purchased components this time, Mike had rebuilt the system with better controls and more precise laser stabilization. When he called Art Bell again, Art noticed the change immediately. Mike's voice had shifted. Darker, faster, carrying an urgency that had not been there before. Objects were not just flickering anymore. They were gone for seconds, sometimes longer. And when they came back, sometimes they came back wrong. He described placing a wooden block between the arcs. It vanished. 3 full seconds of nothing but the hum of the transformers and the sharp electric crack of the arc, filling the space where something solid had been. When the block reappeared, Mike picked it up. Ice cold. Far colder than anything in the surrounding air could account for. As though it had spent those 3 seconds somewhere else entirely. Somewhere with a very different temperature. He tested a flower next. It disappeared and came back wilted and desiccated. As though days had passed for it rather than seconds. And then he described testing with a mouse. The mouse vanished for 5 seconds. When it reappeared, it was alive, but deeply wrong. Spinning, slamming into the walls of its cage, refusing food, refusing water. It died 2 days later. Art told him plainly that he needed to stop experimenting alone. That what he was describing had moved beyond anything one person working without oversight should be doing in a private garage. Mike went quiet for a moment, then said he could not stop. He was too close. He was right that he was close. But what he was close to was not what he believed. His final call to the program came in late February of 1996. He told Art he had enlarged the field to the point where he could step partially into it himself. When he did, time felt different. Everything slowed except him. He could see things happening around him in a kind of stretched, extended moment. And when he stepped back out, more time had passed outside than he had experienced inside. Art asked him directly, "Are you telling me you have built a time machine?" A long pause. Then carefully, Mike said he did not know if it was time travel. But it was something. The field disrupted something fundamental, either normal perception or normal reality, and he could not yet determine which. He promised to call back in March. He would have video, measurements, everything Art had asked for. That call never came. March 1997. The phone was disconnected. Letters came back unopened. The farmhouse looked abandoned. Then, the garage burned. Investigators found melted copper and destroyed transformers and a 6-foot circular burn pattern scorched into the concrete floor. No body. No Mike. Just a handwritten note folded inside a metal toolbox. It read, It's not about time. It's about how you see things. A missing persons report was filed. Nobody pursued it seriously. The world decided Mike Markham was dead. Online, the story spread for years. Time travel theories, government conspiracies, dimensional portals. In 1998, someone dug up a news clipping from 1930 about an unidentified body washed up on a California beach wearing oddly modern clothing with a small metal device covered in unrecognizable symbols in his pocket. When the photograph circulated, people noticed it bore a resemblance to something a 1990s amateur engineer might build. The theories multiplied. None of them had proof. Then, in September 2006, a physics professor in Oregon, who ran a blog about fringe science, opened his email and felt the breath leave his body. The sender line read, "Mike Markham." The message said simply that he was not dead, but that he was not exactly present either. That the machine had worked, but not the way he had thought. Attached were technical diagrams more sophisticated than anything Mike had described on air, field equations, circuit designs, detailed warnings about biological effects on living tissue. The professor tried to reply. Bounced. Traced the IP to a public library in Hawaii. Authorities checked. Nobody there matched the description. Another dead end. And then, October 2022. Andrew and Melanie Carter, early 30s, had just bought a farmhouse in rural Ohio. During a renovation, Melanie's hand hit something solid behind the attic insulation. A heavy wooden box, decades of dust coating every surface. A handwritten label, faded but legible. Mike Markham. Do not open until the right time. Inside were journals spanning 1995 to 2021. Circuit boards, some burned, some pristine, sealed in anti-static bags, and a Polaroid with a date stamp of June 21st, 2021, showing a man standing beside a large ring-shaped metal frame. On the back, in the same handwriting, it did work, but not the way I thought it would. One of the journals contained the exact address of the farmhouse where the Carters now lived. Next to it, a note. Magnetic field stability optimal. Safe storage location. They will find it when the time is right. How did Mike know that address? How did a box hidden years before the Carters ever purchased the property contain documents dated 2021? How had it sat behind that wall without anyone finding it through previous owners, previous renovations, previous decades of ordinary life inside those walls? They posted about it online. The story detonated. 3 weeks later, Andrew's phone rang. No caller ID. The voice on the other end was exhausted, worn down to something barely above a whisper. But anyone who had listened to those old recordings from coast to coast would have recognized it immediately. Mike Markham arrived at the Carter farmhouse on a cool evening that October. 59 years old, which was exactly the right age if he had aged normally since 1997. But he looked far older than that, hollowed out, weathered by something that had nothing to do with years. What he told them dismantled everything. The machine did not move him through time. What it did was desynchronize him from everyone else. He was still present. Same places, same moments, same physical world, but shifted slightly out of phase, like a radio signal tuned just far enough off frequency that the music comes through blurred and incomplete. He could experience the world. The world could not quite experience him back. The night of the fire in March 1997, he had stepped fully into the field with the third-generation machine running at maximum capacity. No flash of light, no sensation of movement, just a quiet, nauseating feeling of disconnection, as though reality had shifted slightly to one side and he had stayed exactly where he was. When he stepped out, hours had passed. The machine had overheated and burned. He escaped. But when he tried to reach people, something was fundamentally, irreversibly wrong. Friends recognized his face, but could not place his name. His landlord had a vague memory of renting to someone but could not hold on to the specifics. Phone calls went nowhere. It was as though his existence had been partially removed from other people's capacity to perceive and retain him. He had not disappeared. He had become difficult to remember. And every time he ran the machine again, trying to understand and reverse what had happened, it got worse. Jobs lasted weeks before colleagues forgot he had ever worked there. Bank accounts could not be maintained because clerks had no memory of opening them. He drifted. Cash work. Temporary rooms. Places where no one needed to hold him in their minds for very long. And all the while he kept researching. Kept trying to understand the mechanism of what he had done to himself. What he eventually concluded was that the machine had not manipulated time. It had manipulated something more fundamental than time. The quantum probability states that determine whether a conscious being can be perceived, acknowledged, and retained in the memory of other conscious beings. Every person exists, Mike said, because other people remember them. Memory is not just how we store the past. It is part of how we construct present reality. And he had damaged his relationship to that process at a level he did not know how to repair. He came back to the Carter farmhouse because he was running out of time in the only way that mattered. Each exposure had deepened the effect. He could maintain coherence to other people for only a few hours at a stretch now. Soon, he would become completely imperceptible. Present, but unregisterable. Alive in a world that had simply stopped being able to notice him. He had planned this moment years in advance. Hidden the box. Waited for the right people. People who would document everything before the last thread snapped. Before he left, he asked for 3 things. Send the journals to a private research archive. Lock the attic because some of the equipment was still magnetically active. And never try to contact him again. He walked out the front door and into the night. And this is the part that will not leave you. Andrew and Melanie both described the same experience beginning almost immediately. The moment Mike stepped off the porch, they had to actively concentrate just to hold on to what he looked like. His face began dissolving in their minds while they were still standing in the hallway. Features blurring. Details sliding. Melanie grabbed a notepad and started writing down everything she could recall because the details were already gone before she reached the kitchen table. The color of his jacket. The shape of his hands. The specific sound of his voice. All of it bleeding out of her memory like ink in water. Within an hour, they were reading their own handwriting like notes left by a stranger. Within a week, reconstructing the conversation required reading those notes entirely because the living memory of it had thinned to almost nothing. The emotion of it. The weight of sitting across from a man who had spent 25 years becoming gradually invisible to the world was dissolving into something formless and distant. Like a dream, carried meaning, but cannot describe no matter how long you lie there, reaching for it. That is what he called unmemory, not forgetting. Something worse and more precise than forgetting. The slow, steady erasure of a person's presence from the minds of everyone they encounter, while the evidence of their existence sits right in front of you, undeniable and completely untethered from anything you can feel. Somewhere out there, Mike Markham is still walking through the world, still breathing, still moving through the same reality everyone else inhabits. But the world is losing its grip on him one encounter at a time. Each person he speaks to holds him a little less clearly than the last. Each memory of him a little thinner, a little more translucent, a little closer to nothing at all. He found a way to break something fundamental about how reality holds a person in place. And reality broke him back in the only way that truly cannot be undone. Not with death. With disappearance from the inside out. Present and permanent and completely, irreversibly forgotten. The machine worked. It just did not work the way anyone expected. and the price was a fate most people never even have a word for. Subscribe, because the stories on this channel do not stop where the comfortable explanations run out. They start there.